for the transcription. Share window. I want this one. Should be the right one. Yes. And then if I click on that and go W, then it goes away and I no longer have the toolbar killing me. And we can actually start going through this. So hello everyone, thank you for coming along. What we're going to do is we're going to go through and do the icebreaker, then we'll do a tiny bit of housekeeping. I'll show you where everything that used to be in the previously on has ended up, so you can give us some feedback on how that goes. Then we're going to talk about the contact form. What do we need? What constraints do we have? Why might people use it? Things like that. And then we're going to go deep diving into the indicator field, because that is a bit of a wild west, and I want to understand how different people are using it, because I appear to have more than 148 different ways that it's being used across, because while there's 148 local authorities, there's been different ways of using it within those local authorities at various times, and I just kind of want to do the tiniest of digs and just understand so I can start putting something together about how we fix it. And then we'll do a feedback corner. And if there's anything that we rabbit hole down, I'm more than happy to rabbit hole. So we'll start off, and I'll just pull up the list of people. So we'll do name, pronoun, where you're from, and your favourite bus type. So, hey everyone, I'm Dr. J, use they as a pronoun. I'm effectively the service owner for NAPTAN at Department for Transport. I'm a consultant from ThoughtWorks. And my favourite bus type at the moment, I had a really nice 360 the other day, which was one of those little, used to nickname them the Munity buses, because they're the single level buses within the TfL network. They're not the double deckers, they're the little single deckers that do the small little roundabout routes, and I had a lovely trip in one of those getting home the other night. So that's my favourite bus type at the moment. So I'll go to Di, because you're next on my list.
Hi, I'm Di Wright from Connect Tees Valley. I'm a she, her. Favourite bus type, double decker. Any sort.
Doug, you're the next one up.
Good morning. So my name's Doug Chmellen, pronouns he, him. I'm from the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. And I don't think I've ever really thought about what my favourite bus type is. But yeah, I would echo front seat with double decker, of course. What absolutely the best seat in the house.
Perfect. Keelan, you're the next person up.
Hi, I'm Keelan, he, him. I work for a company called Q-Routes. We do routing for home to school transport services. We use NAPTAN data quite a bit when we're looking at routes that use stops and things like that. And I controversially actually like New Route Masters, which I feel like is the bus that everyone loves to hate because they're ridiculously expensive and all sorts of other reasons, but I don't know, I just kind of like them.
Brilliant. Leon, you're the next one up.
Hi everyone, Leon Byford, product manager in the digital team at Transport for London. Pronouns, I go by any pronouns. Favorite bus type, I will go for, I think it's called the Enviro 400 EB. That's the new buses we have in on the Route 63 and various other routes. But they're the ones with the skylights and the sort of grab handles on every seat and sort of USB charging. So
you've got them on the 63 route past me, which is where I've seen them. They look lush. I've not been on one yet.
Did you get the chance soon?
Oh, definitely. And Pete, you're the last on the list.
Hello everybody, my name's Pete, he, him pronouns. I'm not from a local authority or from a company as such. I've just become interested in NAPTAN as a byproduct of trying to get data quality improved generally for public transport. My favourite bus type is probably the Volvo MCV Evoras, just because they're very nippy. They're built heavyweight Volvos, and they just do everything that you want them to do.
Fantastic. I love that I can barely describe a bus and everyone else knows their buses well on this call. So I'll just quickly run through some housekeeping to make sure you're all up to date, and I'll show you where all the previously ons have ended up and get some feedback on that. Then we're going to focus in for the first part on the contact form, looking at the different personas who might need it, making sure that we've got all the sort of questions and all the right people, looking at the constraints, how might we do it, and what issues we think might come up. And then we're going to dig into the indicator field, because just trying to understand where it's going a bit wrong. Leon, I haven't used your one, but I can grab your one, or Di, I could grab your indicator field and put it through the same analysis live, and we can kind of see some of the little problems that crop up or don't. I had somebody on Tuesday who was actually as good as what they said, although they did have 2 small mistakes, but they were easy ones to spot. And then we'll have the little feedback corner as usual. We have a YouTube channel. If you're seeing this on YouTube, hi, welcome to the YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, click that button. You've got to say that, otherwise you're not allowed to be on YouTube. We've also got an Eventbrite where all of this is published, and there's a newsletter that we do about every month that covers kind of what we're doing. Signing up for the newsletter also means if there's any outages or any issues with NAPTAN, you're on the list to be notified. So it's kind of, rather than being on a list and not getting an email for ages, we also use it to send out updates. The next meeting's coming up. We've got some on in September, and we're going to be looking at naming conventions. Because again, I've got 148 differences, slight differences, but differences all the way through. And then in October, by popular request, we're going to tackle stop status. What's active, what's inactive, what's suspended, what's pending, what's not pending, what's revised, and we will all get into that deep dive. And then in November, it's TBD. It's possibly going to be rail replacement. I'm just waiting to find out. And then we're not going to do anything in December because Christmas. And then in January, we'll get back into giving you all an accessibility update. However, if we want more on accessibility and what we're doing, I can happily do a little 15-minute run through if people need it. So I forgot to go and do the metrics again. We had a little outage in June. We've not had any outages in July, so we're back to 100% uptime. The outage in June only impacted people uploading for about 3 hours. We're hitting somewhere between 250 and 300 files a month, and we're static on the remove stops at the moment, but we've got some more coming through from various people. Now, remember how there used to be this whole thing explaining all previously on NAPTAN? It's now all in a beautiful page it's now in a beautiful CMS on the NAPTAN website, on the NAPTAN site. So you can go there and you can get all of the guidance. Now, this is an MVP. There's still some styling and reordering and a few things that we're going to do. We're going to have all of the public meeting information. We're going to have all of the stats. Above that, we're just working out how to do that. We've got all of the NAPTAN guidance that we had published in the previously on, and we've also got all of the information about the accessibility coming through. So if there's anything you want to know, have a look at additional information. If there's stuff that you'd like to know that you're not seeing there, give us a yell, because we now have a nice CMS that we can go through and create that information and put it in and work with you to ensure that the stuff you need is sitting here. And if I go back to here, woohoo! So previously on is all done. So contact forms. This has been a kind of a request, and I'm sure Pete's given me more than one request. There's been several ideas over the years around how do we get bus operators and people who run travel planners, so this is the perfect group to talk this through with, and local authorities in contact with each other in a way that makes sense. Because in the old system, people used to just messages, or a lot of people have been around on NAPTAN for years, and have their contact lists of who to talk to at the various local authorities, and the various bus operators. Now there's new people starting, there's more interest in NAPTAN, there's more use of NAPTAN. We don't have that, so we're trying to figure out how do we create something. Do we create something? Do we use a third party option? What do we do? How do we do this? So this is all just kind of having a look at what do we need. I'm going to talk about the possibilities of some options, but this is a no promises version. I've got to figure this out to take this to the SRO board to say, this is the direction I recommend that we go in. What do you think? Here's the problems. So what I wanted to do was just run through the various people who I think are going to be involved. So we've got two types of bus operators, and I've broken them into two. We've got Simone has a bus. So Simone runs a small bus company for a single local authority. She doesn't really understand what NAPTAN is. She knows it's needed to make routing software. In some cases, she doesn't have software and probably does most of the work manually on paper or in an Excel spreadsheet and sends it through to Di or Pete and gets their help to put it through. Neil is a bus operator who has depots. So this is somebody who's got a much larger infrastructure. He's got people who look after his NAPTAN data, who prepare his TransXchange, all of those things. And I use an example as Stagecoach. It's kind of, they've got their national, they have local operations, but a lot of their stuff is controlled nationally. Then we've got Dimitri, who runs a travel planning app. He manages a planning app built on NAPTAN, TransXchange, and SiriRT data. And we've put an example of Citymapper. So this is somebody who's using the data. And then we've got, for our local authorities, we've got John who does it all. So just focusing on these four, I wanted to say, do these sound like the right level of personas to be playing with? And what questions do you think these people would have to take through to get in contact with each other? It's usually, and I have to say, it's usually a bus operator or somebody saying, bus stop be in the wrong place, bus stop be called the wrong thing, I can't find this bus stop. Those seem to be the three questions that I've got in. Does that all make sense? I'm seeing nods. Discussions. Di, does this sound like it describes the situation for you? I know Simone is basically Sue.
Yes, she is. Yes. Yeah.
So if Sue was in a neighbouring local authority and needed to get hold of somebody, do you think she would know how to do that?
She'd probably ask me. Although saying that, I mean, it depends. She has ties with Durham, so she'd know who to ask at Durham. But anywhere else, she would ask me, I think.
And how would you know?
Just working in the industry. you know who it is, or you know who to ask to find out who it is. It's just experience, isn't it?
So Doug, I know you're relatively new to working on NAPTAN. Have you had anyone kind of come to you and say, oh, by the way, we need to move a bus stop, or are people still struggling to find you?
I think in terms of the bus operators, they know where to find us. I think the challenge that we're sort of dealing with at the moment is that we haven't had a bus team, so there hasn't been anybody to contact. And so I'm just sort of soaking up here. You know, I'm afraid I'm not even sure what the contact form is. So I don't want to derail you with some misinformation here and some stray thoughts. But yeah, I guess that's what I feed in has been our experiences. Maybe don't necessarily assume that a local authority has a consistent bus contact, and the person at the local authority might wear a lot of other hats. And they need whatever this is to be extremely simple, because they might have to pick it up and run with it very quickly. That's definitely been our experience.
So Pete and Keelan, you're kind of at the other end of this. When you've needed to get in contact with local authorities, have you known how to do it? Have you been able to find people? Oh, Pete's got his hand up. Wow, wonderfully well behaved.
I've had a lot of issues trying to get in contact with the right people at local authorities. It's been torturous, including people telling me I need to not speak to councils or local transport authorities, but speak to the DFT. I've had people throw me from pillar to post, everything that you could possibly think of. So anything that could get me in touch with the right people quicker would be beneficial.
I think you've come in contact with me several times because people have thrown you to me and I've gone, I need to figure. It's because it's never a straightforward answer because it depends on which bus stop and who's uploading and where I send it off to, and that's part of trying to figure this out. Keelan, what's your experience been like? Because you're also doing school stops, aren't you?
Yeah, so I suppose it's maybe a little bit different because we typically, local authorities are our customers, so we have those contacts with local authorities. It depends a little bit on the local authority, whether that might be an education team, a transport team, some combination of the two. Like Naptown is useful for us, but also in our world with school stops, they're not necessarily in Naptown. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Sometimes we don't have good information about where those stops are, or it's they're not necessarily scheduled routes. I mean, it's a mix. Sometimes they are. So I suppose we're generally less focused on changing something in Naptown and more about kind of getting a data set that makes sense for us. And like Naptown's an ingredient in that. It can be a useful thing, and we can make some assumptions based around Naptown data about where school services might be stopping. But we also end up having our own data, I suppose, about those school-specific routes.
Yeah. In the future, we will be having more conversations. There's just on school stops, just to let everyone know, there's a policy review going on. When we have the answer from that, we will know which way round school stops and Naptown, what the relationship needs to be. I have plans for whichever way round it goes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I will talk to people about those plans once I know which way round it is. It's no use talking to people about something that'll never going to happen. I'm very much about just-in-time analysis.
I suppose some of the other interesting stuff for us, of course, is it's just more general, but like the kind of other metadata about stops. So one of the big things for us is like how much boarding space is there near a stop, or waiting space. Sorry. So how many pupils can we have waiting at a specific stop? That has a big impact, which is to do with all sorts of things like pavement width and safety, and also kind of accessibility. That sort of area is of interest for us, and if that kind of comes through Naptown, that's probably better data than we have in other places, or because local authorities tend not to have that data separately, other than informally knowing. Yeah.
So we are currently working on the accessibility inside Naptown, and one of the things that we're hoping to get hold of is there is a footway width data set from Ordnance Survey, and we're looking at getting that and seeing if we can combine it in with our data, because it stops having to ask local authorities to do footway width. It stops us having to look at something or get AI to look at something and go, is this wide enough? Because wide enough varies in people's minds a little bit. And we can actually provide those proper answers. Leon, I know that TfL has its own special forum where a lot of this conversation happens, because you're big enough to have this. Do you have any, which is, I think you're doing the London thing of London is the exception to everything here.
Yeah, as you say, we have a forum where people can sort of report issues, and people do report issues with our Naptown data, and people also contact us through our online form and other means, and that gets sort of cascaded to us. So I think I like to think that works reasonably well, but we're going to do a bit of sort of research as well in terms of finding out how people find our sort of like, are people able to sort of contact us and get issues resolved. One thing that I do wonder though, because one thing is that we do, like, our services, our bus services are not all entirely within London. We do have services that operate outside of the Greater London area, so they will serve bus stops that are in other local authorities. And so far, actually, we haven't had. I mean, I haven't noticed any issues with NAPTAN data outside of London. But if I did see an issue, I wouldn't necessarily know how to get in touch with the local authority to get that addressed. So I think this is a good question here.
Yeah, I use Denham as an example for you because it's outside of London. It's in Buckinghamshire, but it's got TfL bus stops because you've got the TfL flags and everything, and therefore 90 bus stops that are next to the Buckinghamshire bus stops. On the same street, but they don't tend to share. You don't tend to share stops. You tend to have them next to each other. But it'd be interesting to go through some of those examples with you and find those edge ones, because London has a permeable boundary, which I don't think many other local authorities have. You tend to have slightly more rigid. This side of the road is this local authority, and this side of the road is the other. Di's going to tell me differently. Di's going to tell me that it's all permeable, and her and Durham carefully share that. But we'll go to Doug first, and then Di can tell me about the permeable barriers around Stockton-on-Tees.
Well, now I want to hear about permeable barriers around Stockton-on-Tees. But sorry, I was just listening into the conversation. So my understanding of the contact form then, and that actually sounds like a real missing piece. So thanks for looking at it. Is if somebody wants to report some missing information or some error in NAPTAN, how do they contact people? And absolutely hearing that how difficult it can be if you've got a really specific question like that sometimes to navigate through a local authority to find the right person that we know about, particularly if you're sort of external to the organisation. So wow, this is really good. In terms of sort of personas then, so whether we do this in the future, I'm not sure, but I know we're not alone in doing this as a local authority. We have agents essentially who work for us to look after our NAPTAN data. So is that represented somewhere on here as a persona, somebody who works on behalf of a local authority? Because there is a slight difference in that the instruction would need to go to them that there's an issue, and then they'd almost be providing a recommendation back to a local authority saying, this work is required. Do you support it?
So when we put in agents, let me just grab one of my service designs, because I've got this one will do, because I think I've got all the local authority. So yes, I break my local authorities into this is not one that I want to share because it's got somebody else's comments on it. Just bear with me here a second. I'll just grab this one. Yes, this is the one that I recently opened. Here we are. So when we've got our local authority users, we now have 5 personas. We started off with 4, but we've now got 5. When we're doing things like contact forms, we tend to use John Who Does It All as the main example, but when we come to user testing and planning out the details, we look across all 4. So we have John Who Does It All, which is that person who does the whole of the NAPTAN process for a local authority. Di would be an example, I think, of somebody who's doing everything NAPTAN, bus-wise, etc. Yeah. It's all with that one person. Then we have Sindhu and Kim, who at one point were doing Durham, but it's now back to a single person. But we have 2 people who are pairing on it, and they're in a and one of the reasons we talk about there being in a non-hierarchical relationship is this is all about how we do permissioning and thinking about who gets to approve what. They're people who are working side by side. One may have the title manager and the other one doesn't, but effectively in their day-to-day work, they're side by side, they're pairing on it. Then we've got Andy, the mega agent, because Andy loves this, I believe, because we've literally got 2 broad types of agents. We've got Andy and Tansy, and they have a user who we call Joy, who works with an agent. So Andy looks after the NAPTAN data processes for many local authorities, and they're in a commercial relationship with the local authority. They host software and provide services. Tansy also looks after the NAPTAN data for many local authorities. Tansy has a team Andy works mostly by himself. So there's also slight variations even within how agents work. The other thing everyone will learn while we're doing this is there are so few people who do NAPTAN, that instead of doing the anonymizing of personas, our personas literally name the person that it is, because it's just so much easier. We talk about Andy and Tansy, and we can give Andy and Tansy a call and ask them questions about how they're using things. So the thing that we've got here, the local authority has a relationship with their agent and not directly with NAPTAN, and that's very key for us to understand, that the agent is the person who's doing most things. And if Doug has an agent, how do we know that Doug has an agent, and to send it off to the agent and not to Doug, even though Doug is managing some of the parts and coming along to meetings? And this is all that complex web that we need to play with. Then we've got Gerard Butler and team, who manages the NAPTAN process for a large local authority, and they have a team who do the day-to-day work. And this is an example is TfL. Another example is Transport for Greater Manchester, Transport for West Midlands. There are large teams who are doing this work, and there's a little bit of coordination across the teams sometimes that we need to be aware of. And then we now have we didn't have this person in there. They were represented by this here, of somebody who we could indirectly see. We've now created a little persona for them called Joy, based on Joy in Hampshire, who works with an agent and doesn't have direct contact with NAPTAN. So when it comes to accessibility and getting the street furniture information, it's a whole new relationship between us and Joy, because this is the first time she's actually directly interfacing with us. So we are thinking about all these different types. When I'm starting off to do something like this, I tend to use John, who does it all, that solo person looking after a local authority, as kind of the first stepping stone to simplify in. And then as things get more complicated, yes, Doug, you've brought up some really good complications, is when we start to build this out. I'm going to have to think about these complications with whatever we design and build or put in place, or whatever. Then we've got a couple of other users. So we've got Ava, who manages BODs, sometimes needs to get in contact with us. Our support users, our Andrew, who supports the team, who I don't have anyone at the moment, so it's literally both of these personas are just me. We will take in the email requests from somebody to say, hey, I need to get in contact with this local authority. And it's kind of going, well, how do we manage it? So we've got a couple of constraints and and I've got a want as well. Actually, I'll put the want in there because I need to have visibility and follow up. Because what happens is I will, and everyone's aware, I'm not shaming anyone in saying this. This is talking about what happens is I will get a request from somebody like Pete to say, hey, I need to raise an issue with somebody about this bus stop. Now that could be something from a person said, hey, this bus stop is called the Dun Cow, and the Dun Cow is no longer a building. The building's been knocked down. It's now, because it used to be a pub and it's now a pile of apartments. Could we call it something that makes a little bit more sense? And I then pass that along. I know nothing from then on. I believe I've passed it to the right person, but I get no more feedback on it. 6 months later, the same person comes to me and says, nothing happened with that. NAPTAN's useless. Nothing ever happened. And I'm constantly fighting but NAPTAN's actually quite good data. We are working very hard to improve it. So there's two constraints that I need to play off here. The solution cannot share PII information. So if Pete wants to get into contact with Doug, I can't give Pete Doug's personal email, Doug's name, or anything like that. I need to send it through, but it needs to be so that Doug can then decide how they respond. Do they respond from a group mailbox? Where do they go from? The other thing is we as DFT need to have a little bit of visibility. Not a lot, just enough to know that it got picked up. Just enough to know that somebody was going to look at it and maybe even, yes, I did the thing, or no. One of the ones that also crops up is bus stop gets moved. Bus operators go, we don't believe the bus stop should have been moved. Can you move it back? Local authority goes, we had to move it because there was a crash there, and it was it was determined to be in an unsafe place. We've now moved it to a safe place, and that discussion seems to take about 18 months at least to happen at various points. Yeah, I love the way everyone's laughing because you've all been there with that discussion. So we need to have a little bit of visibility so we can see what's going on, so we can help people out. So the idea, which how might we do this? So either I create a form and I do all of this via our site and we publish it, and we'd do it via an API so people could put it into their tools. So somebody could say for a passenger travelling, for Beryl, as she travels, she finds a bus stop that isn't where she thought it was, or was 100 meters away from where it was. It's not like 20 meters away. It's like several hundred meters away from where it's reported. She can quickly report that back via the app that she's sitting in. That's one option. The other option is to use Fix My Street or something similar, which a lot of local authorities are signed up to. So have a specific fixing bus data kind of form in Fix My Street that is really super simple. It uses all the Fix My Street infrastructure. So if you've got a bus department, it'll go through to the bus department because some local authorities already have bus stuff within Fix My Street. If it's just a general one, it'll go, if the local authority isn't set up with a bus department, it'll just go through to the general inquiries and then be funneled through. One of the big things for me of using Fix My Street is I can probably get this set up in a short period of time. They also provide an API so that I can then track things using the API. They have quite a decent form tracking follow-up piece that I would need to replicate as well. So those are the things, but we are slightly concerned if we take ourselves onto a third party, does that take us into there for forever and ever in the future? What happens as things change? So there's a little bit of future proofing and checking things out. So very quick question for the three people on local authorities. Fix My Street, what's your thoughts? It's probably the easiest first starter for 10 here. Do you use it already? Di, you can go first.
Strangely, I've had my first Fix My Street report this week in a number of years, certainly pre-pandemic. I haven't had one since then, and I got one just this week to deal with. So I think it works. I just don't know how widespread it is, because you'd really think that you should get these. I mean, I know what's wrong with my stops out on the street, and there's been a lot in the last few years, and yet we've had nothing via that method. So you just wonder whether people actually know about it to use it.
This is partly why when I said whatever we do, I want also the ability to publicize it to the travel apps and things like that, so they can integrate. Do you need to give feedback on a stop? Here's or on bus stops or broken bus stops or something like that. There's somewhere to do that. That's just a single click within the app or something like that. That's kind of where I'm thinking about it. And just trying to think of how we get it into the passengers and the bus operators and the bus drivers' hands, because the bus driver will also know, hey, this stop be broken, this stop be in the wrong place. This stop's name is so confusing, I have to explain it 200 times every single day. Dunton Road and Old Kent Road Tesco's is my favourite one. That Leon will smile about, because I believe they know the stop. And it's those small ones that I'm like, if we can give the people who are feeling the most pain about it just the ability to do that quick feedback and do that so it can be integrated into whatever they're using. That's kind of what I'm thinking about, to make it super valuable and useful. Leon, your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, TfL uses Fix My Street. I think we call it Street Care. And to be honest, I don't entirely know what the internal processes are for how that works. I mean, I believe essentially our contact center kind of initially triages it and then most likely forwards on issues to other departments. And I suppose it would work in a similar way, so that our contact center would sort of take on these kind of issues and pass them on to Gerard's team. I mean, I can't speak for Gerard in terms of how well that would sort of work for his team, but it's an interesting idea, and I mean, one of the good things that I quite like about Fix My Street is that you can sort of go in and see issues that have been previously reported, and you can say that, oh, okay, this has already been reported. I don't need to report it myself, and you can sort of see what responses have been given to that, and you can sort of add in additional comments to other people's reports, I think. So yes, it's an interesting idea, and one thing I just wonder is, I mean, it would assume that all local authorities sort of used Fix My Street, and if there were an issue with a stop in a local authority that didn't use Fix My Street, then how would you kind of report that issue? I guess you just sort of have to go the way that we currently do things and have to try and find a contact.
Yeah, so speaking with Fix My Street, because I've done some of the prep work for this, they say that they've got all of the country. I'm not 100% certain of that. I know that they have contacts into all of the country's contact centres, I believe. So that, I think, is the bleeded edge there of even if a local authority isn't signed up to Fix My Street have a way of getting the details into them. I need to go and firm that up. And then also part of it is publicising and thinking about how this happens. Doug, I know that you've got some thoughts, and then I'll get thoughts from Pete and Keelan as well, as the people who would be possibly using this mechanism.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear from a user perspective. I think where we are, I think you articulated at the start the kind of the pros and the cons of Fix My Street. I think it probably couldn't be the only. If you wanted to use Fix My Street, it probably couldn't be the only avenue, because there are equivalent rival apps that some council use. So why would we choose Fix My Street over those? So, for instance, my local authority where I live would push us towards Love Clean Streets. And where we are in RBWM, so where we work, so yes, we just get an email through to the contact centre, I understand, and so then our contact centre staff have to essentially fill in our own form based on the information that was provided. So there's an element of double entry. So what we always ask is, we always encourage people to use the web forms we've got on our website, because that saves us a lot of time. So it's, Fix My Street works, but it isn't particularly slick, so that's the kind of situation there.
Yeah, no, that's great. I found out about Fix My Street because I use it here in London to report stuff, and I was also working with North Northamptonshire and West Northamptonshire, and they use Fix My Street, and that's part of their flow. And I was like, so it's more than just a London thing. Let's have a look at how widespread it is. So yeah, it's trying to, this is one of the things. I have over 148 people to contact, all different groups of people, there is almost a different way for every single one of them. Like everyone who uses Fix My Street in anger has modified their Fix My Street as well. So this is partly trying to figure out, do I do something as a proof of concept and then use the information from that to build something myself? Do I need to build something myself, full stop, because the ecosystem is just too complicated and we've got to do it this way? And then we run into the Midlothian problem, which is, no, Midlothian still are ghosting me. Somebody got in contact it was several months ago, before Purdah, somebody from Midlothian got in contact and was like, I'm never going to ghost you. And I'm like, and guess what's happened? They've ghosted me. So I'm still not sure what's going on with Midlothian. And I use Midlothian, and there's also Dumfries. There's a couple of local authorities that haven't updated their NAPTAN since 2018. So they are people that we are desperate to get in contact with to find out what's going on and to get them into updating their NAPTAN or engaging with us. But they're not in areas that have to go into BODs. So I don't have quite the same push as I would within England. They're outside of England.
Can I add that I can recognise it's very difficult. So that's our situation with Fix My Street. But I am a bit of a fan of, sometimes the first thing doesn't have to be perfect. If it's quick and it creates something that isn't currently there, maybe start with Fix My Street.
That's part of what I'm thinking, and I'm thinking to propose is maybe a year to 18 months of using Fix My Street, and then see what we learn from doing that, all the complications, and go, right, how do we fix these? Do we engage with Fix My Street and try to fix these complications, or do we build something ourselves and do a move across? The other question that I have for you, there are some people who can only update their NAPTAN on a quarterly basis, and this is simply because they don't have the resources, which I totally understand. There's small local authorities, they don't have the resources, so they provide just a quarterly update to NAPTAN. So I'm thinking of making I escalate and start chasing after 6 months of inaction rather than a couple of weeks of inaction, because I know that yous are all wonderfully engaged, but there are sometimes there are reasons why a local authority will take quite a bit of time to get to the information, to understand it, and to take it on through. And I just, Pete and Keelan, is 6 months too long, too short, reasonable, unreasonable? Pete.
As somebody who does put in these comments to local authorities quite a lot, I've just had a quick play on Fix My Street to try and do a couple, and it works at a small scale. But some of these authorities, I've got, where's my list here? I think I've got over 100 stops that I found in Shropshire that are out of place. I'm not going to be doing this 100 times for each and every single stop. It works on a small scale for the ones and twos where it's not worth emailing a full web form to the local authority. But I think on a bigger scale, it might hit a few issues.
And with that bigger one, would you do something like, here is a pile of here is one example stop. I have a pile of stops. Could you get in contact and I can provide the rest of the stops, perhaps? Not to tell you how to do your job or to suggest, because I know that it is frustrating, especially when there's a large list of them.
I have tried that before, and sadly it doesn't always return results.
This is also why I want DFT to have some visibility, not to manage, not to micromanage or anything, but to be that escalation point, or to know what's going on. So when things get escalated to me via MPs and things like that, I've at least got a Scooby's chance of figuring out when it was raised, what's happened, etc., whether it's gone to the wrong local authority, and things like that. Because one of the hard things is also helping you all figure out who to contact. Because sometimes it's a bit, and I'm not going to use Denham as an example. Well, I'll use Denham very quickly as an example. There's 2 bus stops side by side, but you'd contact 2 different people depending on which bus stop it is. Because one is a TfL one that's on the 490 ATCO code, and one is Buckinghamshire one that's on 040. The fact that I know that is kind of sad and shows a lot about my life, that I know those 2 ATCO codes off by heart now. So Pete, here's a question for you. How do you know which local authority you should be talking to when you look at a bus stop? And you're going to tell me local knowledge and you've got an understanding of geography.
That is probably the main part of it. But sometimes if I'm really unsure, Google Maps is great in showing you the NAPTAN code. So you can generally try and work it out from there. Failing that, you can go into NAPTAN, find the stop and report it accordingly.
There's several layers there that I don't think that a member of the public or even most small bus operators thinking of the Simone has a bus one of the drivers for Simone has a bus would be confident doing. So I'm trying to think of something that's a little bit higher. Keelan, do you have any thoughts on this?
Not hugely, I think. I mean, like, as I said, I don't think we actually make reports of issues in NAPTAN very, very often because of where we are, and I think we would do them through whatever system we needed to if we're doing it. If there was reason to do it in a, I guess, professional context. Fix My Street is interesting. It's slightly weird for me being in these conversations as not being in a local authority, because like that was my world for about 5 years, and so it's kind of funny to be having these conversations about Fix My Street versus other reporting platforms again. I think, like the Fix My Street model, obviously you kind of get stuff emailed in, and then if you want to integrate it with your own systems, then that's a kind of an additional cost, whatever way you want to look at it, whether it's an integration cost or whatever. And some local authorities have chosen to go down that route, and some haven't. While they'll all probably receive, reports in through Fix My Street. I mean, the Northamptonshire ones, whether it's west or north, I can't remember after the split, or maybe both of them kind of chose to go down that route, but they were in maybe a slightly unusual position in that they were, 2 new unitary authorities that had a chance to look at some of this stuff from fresh and maybe looked at some off-the-shelf solutions because they were trying to get that done quickly in the process of unitarisation, as opposed to maybe an Essex, for example, because I used to work for Essex, that had systems that have been in place for years and years and have no real incentive to change. And I kind of doubt that they would be sort of massively on board with Fix My Street, although I'm sure people did make some reports in through that. I would say with this is probably relatively low volume compared to some of the other things that local authorities might get reports in about, potholes and all of that kind of thing. So maybe it's not something you have to worry too much about the method, even if there is a bit of double entry and moving across between things in the first instance. I don't know if there's 100 stops, that's slightly different, but I don't know. I don't have figures on that, but certainly when we'd be looking at stuff that came into contact centres in local authorities, that this wouldn't have been as high on the list as some of the bigger ticket ones like potholes and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point of for me, this is like a constant low-level rumble and it's kind of a dozen or more people across a year, so maybe one a month, comes in of I need to contact this person, or I've contacted this person, I've had no response, or something like that, and it's kind of like or I've tried to contact this local authority and I've had no response. And it's like, well, where did you send it? Who did you send it to? How did you send it through? And just it's where it's that constant low-level noise also grumbles around about, and it leads to some of the conversations around the NAPTAN data not being good because because of this constant rumble of people not being able to get things fixed. And Pete, I will talk to you after this and we'll get in touch with Shropshire and I will bash. No, I won't bash heads together. I will get people sitting in a room to discuss where things are not quite right and why things are not quite right. But I see you've got your hand up.
I just wanted to add, while putting in them two, I found a great response from a local authority that I'd done one through before to Fix My Street. And I think it comes back to somebody else said about how it goes into the central contact centre, because they threw it back to me saying that they thought it was just full of spelling mistakes because they didn't understand what NAPTAN is. They just thought it was a random mix of letters.
So, right. So when there's some education on setting it up as well, so that the people who will receive these will be in the right spot. So that's something hopefully I can, because whatever we did for this, because one of the things I don't want to be doing is sending this into an individual, setting this up so it goes to an individual, because individual mailboxes are the worst. It should be going into group mailboxes. Does this mean I've got to go out to all 148 local authorities and get a group mailbox this can be sent into and create that? Which is why Fix My Street kind of has done enough of the work that I can start to prove this out as a model and just see how much this contact form is needed, because a lot of them feel like very small fixes, but I know they're very important fixes, and that's also the other thing. And I think, coming back to Pete's point, people think those very small things are nothing that'll come to a contact center, and they think, oh, but why would somebody worry about the apostrophe appearing or disappearing or something like this? And why does this matter? When in fact it matters quite a lot when you're trying to get Beryl to go to see Beverly, and Beryl is trying to figure out, going to a new place, what she's going to see on the sign, what she's going to see in Google or in her travel planner needs to match up with what it's going to be called on the bus. So when she asks, I need to go to the stop, it's really clear what it's called. And I use Dunton Road and Old Kent Road Tesco's as an example, and this is not to pick on TfL, because there's a lot of conversations around, which we'll get to in the next meeting, about how we do names. A lot of this is tied into those naming conventions. And there's a stop. There's two stops called Dunton Road. One of them is locally known as Old Kent Road Tesco's. Some of the buses say Old Kent Road Tesco's. Some of the buses say Dunton Road. And it is one of those wonderfully confusing moments because it is listed under various things. And Leon, I know what it is. It's some are reporting stop area and some are reporting stop, and it's how it's been rigged up on the displays and things like that. And it's one of those weird little local, which is why I totally get what locals know something as and what it's known nationally as can sometimes be really different, and you need to kind of balance out both. Pete, I think you've got a legacy hand. Am I right? And
yeah,
so Keelan, no worries at all. Keelan.
I was just thinking about the right contact and right mailboxes within local authorities for this kind of thing. And I'm just thinking back because I worked for TFWM in the past as well. And we had, I suppose, a general policy that pretty much all contact with customers and members of the public needed to come through the contact center flow. And the reason for that was because issues would come up where someone had contacted somebody that they knew in a particular area within TFWM, and something didn't happen because that person was doing something else or too busy or moved on. Then it got escalated to a counsellor or somebody like that, who then made an inquiry, and it would come to somebody more senior, and they're like, we have no idea, we have no visibility of this contact with this person. And so because of issues like that, we tried to generally move to a model where everything, at least in the first instance, came through a contact center contact. So I think if I was at TFWM at that time, things may have changed. Things might be different with the way that Denise and the team sort of handle the NAPTAN stuff, or whoever it is that's doing it now. They may have had specific contact with particular individuals, but in general, I think we would always have tried to do it through contact center for that kind of traceability reason. That's just a thought. I think we'd be quite reluctant to having individuals coming into contact without any record of that, because it just would cause issues. And also they're not necessarily the people who work in the contact center are kind of best placed to have that interaction directly with the customer or member of the public, and have the skills to sort of handle some of the things that come up in the way that someone where that's not a main part of their job might handle that slightly differently. Having said that, I've contact with plenty of individual members of the public for various reasons, as did I know others in other specialist areas, but I think just the visibility was important.
I think you bring, I've called it traceability, because I think it's a really, really important piece. And this is also why I'm reluctant to send things to the users who are uploading on Naptan, which is basically my only way of doing it currently, because sometimes that user may be an agent, so they won't know the local situation, or it's somebody and it ends up in their personal mailbox, which doesn't get looked at as much as the group mailbox and things like that. We also do that here. We've got a group mailbox, and I say, even if you're emailing just me, put it in the group mailbox, and you can CC me in, and it'll come to my personal mailbox. But if it's in the group mailbox, it's more than just me looking at it. So if I forget to do it, if it gets lost in my to-do list, there's somebody else who's going to be chasing that up, and we'll be able to see it and trace that back. I think we've kind of covered what issues might happen. And so let's change gears inside of our heads, leaving aside contact forms for the moment. And then we're going to go on to looking at indicator field. Just to do a quick summary of the options. There's too many options in the indicator field. There are over 10,000. When we have a look at what's in the indicator field, there's 10,000 individual items. There should be less than 100. And this is saying like stand 1 to 10, stop 1 to 10, etc. Stands A to Z. There's around about 100 to maybe 150 variations. We are trying to figure out why there's so many variations. So one of the things was we then started to look at, so I bought a number of ATCO area codes, and I've got a little sheet that I can run them through, so we can if you feel confident, I can go and do yours live, and I will go through this. But we've got the ATCO area code, how many stops it's got, and how many indicators they've got at those stops. And you can see here, for example, 522 has a lot of stops but very few indicators. And I think that's got a lot to do with the style, because they're a very rural ATCO, a very rural area. You can see it's generally a 1-to-1-ish. When we have a look at this is how many different types of indicators some of them have. Well, 522 doesn't have many indicators it stops. It's got 42 different variations. Then you've got somebody like 040, which has 327, 206. Leon, you've got quite a few as well. I can do yours if we want. Then what I did was I go through and then I had a look at, well, where are the things that maybe are going a little bit not quite as expected. So I've pulled together and I color coded them. So we've got these ones, we've got blank 1 space, blank 2 space, and blank 6 spaces. So I'm going to go to 522 and just go, do you want to just take those spaces out? I think they've accidentally at some point in time put a space in there as a placeholder, because if you recall from the last meeting where we talked about turning on the validator for the text fields, indicator field is a free text field, but it's never had any validation put on it. So the common name and the short common name, the common name and the locality name have a validator that don't allow certain characters. It's never been turned on for indicator. So we want to turn it on for indicator. That will allow us to clear some of this up. We're also going to accept a number of characters like forward slashes and arrows and particular sets, because we recognize that people are using them and that they've been told not to use them. The other ones that we've got is, for example, if you see these brown ones, we've got outside, outside, and outside, all 3 different ways of doing the same thing. So one of the things that we're thinking of doing is going to 522 and going, what should outside be, and coming up with trying to get everybody to use the same one, if at all possible. The same with op and opposite. We've got different variations of that. When we had a look at 120, I just pulled out the ones that they had problems with. So we had near, opposite, and southeast bound. These 2, humans would instantly see them as being the same. Within computer systems, they're seen as being 2 completely different ones. So we're just kind of wanting people to be consistent and either use southeast and then a capital B, or use southeast hyphen lowercase b. There'll be a couple to change. We'll just tweak those. 010 had only a few wild things. Most of them, I believe, are stops that they're going to delete, because they've marked them up for deleted, because they seem to have the same very similar ways of doing it. Where we looked at 040, we had some really interesting ones around adjacent. They have 4 different versions of adjacent, 2 different versions of eastbound, 2 different versions of in, and 3 versions of near, which is kind of putting in near, and the side road should be the bit that's picked up, rather than putting that in the indicator. So it's kind of like, how do we use the indicator field becomes part of the question. And as you can see, they have quite a lot of adjacents and entrances, and their outsides is just a lot of outsides. Yes. So I can also bring up, if I grab sheets, I should be able to bring up indicator field. So here we have some my lovely indicator fields, and I can go and I can just, I'm using the CSV file. I know I rant against the CSV file, but it's one of the few times that it's really useful. So, Di, shall we go have a look at yours?
Yeah, carry on.
So what's your echo code? What's your 3-letter?
Which one would you like?
Oh, good
077. Let's go for the Stockton one.
Yeah. I was just going to say, we'll just choose one, because the smaller the better, because it means that this goes relatively fast. Import, upload, browse. One of the reasons why I always use Sheets over Excel is because I can just do that, and it stops it doing dropping the first 0 on your echo codes if they turn into numbers, and it smooths out some of the conversions. In Excel, that's a multi-step process for me to do that one click. And you can do it in any. This is not saying that there is only one. So let's have a look and see how file insert pivot table. Here we are, new sheet. Let's have a look how it goes. So we're going to go echo code here. You've got 1300 stops. Then I'm going to throw indicator here. You've got a lot of numbers. You've got 2 eastbounds. You've got 2 northeast bounds. You've got 2 southwest bounds and 2 westbounds. But otherwise, what's that?
Interesting. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Like that. Okay.
And this is just one of those small ones that, and you're using indicator to indicate a flex stop, which is a use, and you've got some blanks as well. So yeah, I can show you how to do this. It's really quick and fast. It's a good way of just seeing where those issues are.
Can you filter that by active stops? Because if some of those are inactive, that's
yeah, I can do that. I can put a status up the top here in a filter. I want to go up the top. Oh, I'll do it this way. So those are active, those are inactive. So your inactive.
So I would ignore the inactive
Yeah, there's 265 inactives. Those are the ones. It'd still be nice to get some of these little duplicate ones cleaned up. There's only 1 or 2 stops to change, and it's just making sure that you're using the same language all the way through. And again, because we've never said how to do it, it's one of those ones. I love the way that most of them are stop marked A.
Yeah, well, that's what we
Over-
put on the indicator field is used on our roadside information on
Yeah.
the flag, so to indicate which either side of the road, obviously. But then we ran into issues where we had a group of stops where there might have been 5 stops within the stop. Sort of in North Ormsby Marketplace has got 6 stops, so we couldn't put E in the indicator field because it would consider it to be eastbound.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, obviously there is one there,
Yeah.
but we had to run into this sort of thing.
Yeah. So Leon, how confident do you feel if I do this on London?
To be honest, I have it open on my screen actually, and it's not so great.
Let me do this. Let me do the same thing now because I feel it's only fair. Doug, I won't do it for you because I know that you're only just starting to take on yours. Although I can, and you can see the things that you'll need to look at in the future if you would
I'm well
like.
aware of the poor state of our indicator fields. Very poor.
This will take, because London is our largest, so some of this will run a little bit slower. And this is so I will grab some diagrams that we used in the previous one once I've got London, the previous discussion, and I'll pull those diagrams across because we got into interesting discussions about T-junctions and crossroads, because we suddenly discovered that I think everything is a T-junction, because I pointed out that's a capital T-junction and that's a lowercase T-junction, at which point everyone went, oh, that's how you've seen the world. That was literally a conversation with my friends about 5 years ago when I said, you go through the T-junction, they're like, that's not a T-junction. I said, yes, it is. It's a lowercase T. And that was... I was like, I thought you there's nothing like being the person I can't find anywhere in this country, and if I say a T-junction. So you've got 21,000 stops in London. Let's put indicator field into rows and see how this goes. Okay, so we know that you've got so here what you've got is you've got all these ones with the dashes, which I kind of said, okay, we'll exempt the dash hypheny thing, Pac-Man, but then you've got some without the dash that should fall into the same thing. So you've got southeast with a dash and southeast without a dash. You've only got one adjacent, which is good. Northbound, southbound, etc. Stands, lots of stands, lots of just called stop. 5,500 called stop. Most of those, sorry, I'm just looking down to see if there are things that are obvious duplicates. I know that London has many, many indicator fields everywhere because they're the little red balls on top of everything. Scrolling a lot. They're all called stop, which is nice and handy. We could not use stop. So there's actually not that many. What would be interesting would just be to see you've got northbound, eastbound, westbound, and then you've also got this east, etc. And it's like, what is the difference between those? And just having a conversation of maybe summarizing that down. But otherwise, it's nowhere near as bonkers as it could be. Doug, shall we try yours and just get a sense of the crazy?
You can certainly have a look. Ours is looked after, or has been looked after by Buckinghamshire, so it'll be very similar to, I think, 040.
Yeah. let's just get in there. File, import, browse.
My sort of I think you said indicator hasn't been sort of previously very well defined, and it seems people are using it for about 3 or 4 different things, and that suggests that it shouldn't be one field. That suggests there's a very fundamental problem there, and some of this seems to be just looking at, and I'm sure this is the case in ours as well, is used for to duplicate fields which are elsewhere, which doesn't feel very good. And also, a lot of these abbreviations are really, because this gets displayed to people in lots of different ways which we don't control. ADJ is not suitable because it's going to be off-putting to new users. There are going to be people whom that's inaccessible, actually, because we're not doing enough to explain to them clearly in plain English what we mean. So there's something, this is a really interesting conversation because there's something very fundamentally wrong with the indicator field at the moment, isn't there?
Oh yeah, this is almost like you've brought up everything that I want to understand here, because one of the things, and this is Di, you've looked after your local authority for, and I'm not going to say thousands of years, and it's not been 84 years, but it has been some time.
From the beginning, yeah.
From the beginning. We'll just not mention when the beginning was. So from the beginning, Di has looked after Stockton and places like that in Teesside. They all will have the same dialect and the same language because it's come from Di's brain. So Di's interpreted things in the same way, which has meant that the people who do the local travel systems and everything are used to looking at it through that same lens. What I'm finding, so Di's is relatively consistent, as is London. London's got its own consistency because London gets to do things slightly differently. You're completely right, Doug. There are people who are using indicator to do other things because they don't know what indicator is for. They are replicating things. I know one local authority that puts indicator also in the common name, which makes it very, very difficult for anyone to trying to do something nationally to do something with the indicator field, because there are so many different ways of using the indicator field. Sometimes it's replicating stuff, so it's not consistent. So it becomes, what is the indicator about? What are we trying to say here? What is it all about? And I know that this stuff, and I'm not even going to mention having a look at the schema, because the schema actually doesn't have a lot of guidance around indicator field. It's not precise enough to what we want to use it for now. Di, was that what you were going to say? Go look at the schema. Were you going to nullpoint? Was I going to nullpoint you?
Not at all. I wouldn't dare do that. No, I was just thinking that one of our authorities, Darlington, just uses I and O for inbound and outbound.
Wow.
Which, okay, Darlington is a main town within its 076. And we didn't do Darlington from the very beginning. They were on their own. We took it over later. And I find it quite difficult to work out, just looking at it, as to which side of the road is inbound and outbound, because it depends where you're going.
This was one of the discussions actually from the other day, which is inbound and outbound doesn't make sense because you need to know. Yes. They used the example because it was Elise, so it was, are they going into, and I'm going to say there's Derby and there's somewhere, and going from Nottingham to Derby, going between the two big towns, is it inbound or outbound if you're going to the biggest town? But if you're on one of the villages going into one of those towns, the inbound and outbound are even slightly more different. So you can be on the same road, going in the same direction, and have one say that it's inbound and one say that it's outbound on the different bus routes.
Yeah, but don't get started on circular routes.
Yeah.
you had to mention it, didn't you? And give me that extra mind blowing of circular routes. Just give me 2 seconds to do. I want to go view. I want to freeze the top row because I always forget to do that. And then when I want to go and do anything important with it, I lose my mind. Pivot table. So let's do Darlington as well. ATCO code. So let's see whether this is all just I and O, because that would be absolutely hilarious. There's a lot of I, there's a lot of O, and then there's see, and this is where I agree with Doug. You've got flex and you're saying hail and ride within the indicator field, which is also in the stop type. So you're replicating information into another data field that exists there already. So this comes down to, this makes it hard for people to do. I want to show, here's the common name, Westminster Terrace. Here is the locality, Buckinghamshire. Here is the indicator field, which would be something opposite, and then it's got. You could then do the stop type as hail and ride if it's a hail and ride or a flex stop. But if you've got it in the indicator field, you end up seeing hail and ride, hail and ride. This is part of the problem that various data consumers have brought up, is this inability to join the information together from the fields because of you end up with these weird duplications. And it's been set up in a way, and I will non-pour myself, even within the schema. It gives multiple options of how to join things up. And I'm like, did you understand what you were doing? Because if you've got multiple options within the schema of how to join up these fields, you've made it almost impossible for people to, because you have to do manual exceptions all over the show because of how localities, indicators, and common names, even just doing that. And bearing is interesting because Leon uses it a lot. It's used a lot in London, eastbound, westbound, northbound, because we also use that a lot on the tubes within London, of understanding which tube platform to catch, which is great because London's got its own style of talking about these things. But it also it generally replicates what's the field I want? I've forgotten. The bearing field. So the bearing field, and in fact, I will run to 490. So your indicator field and your bearing field should be the same. Let me just grab one of these ones. I'll just grab the easts. The east should all be easts. So some of these, you've got an east that's going northeast on its bearing. You've an east that's southwest. Okay. Some of this is clearly bonkers, and there's some real. This is where your data may need a quick look. So all the east should be east bearings. So do we need to show? And does London need to correct the bearings and show the bearings, or are the bearings only used for knowing if the bus has left the bus stop? Because is the bearings something that we would display to passengers, show Beryl as she's trying to travel, or is the bearings only for the buses to know they're going in the right direction to have left the stop, and that's all about the real-time information and predictability and knowing that I've left the stop going in the right direction. So this is all again fascinating. How are we making this data make more sense and be more sensible? Let's run back to this pivot table. So these hail and rides, you've got to. I love the way you've got hail and ride and har at the same time. Now I'm just going to do a little bit of. Just bear with me here a moment. I need to grab it from the side here, just so that I grab the right piece of the puzzle and not another piece of the puzzle. Bear with me for 2 seconds. Are you going to open it in the right? No, it's going to open in this screen, but you're just going to all be looking at a screen that's not the screen for 2 seconds. Bear with me. I want to go to here. I want to go to the one I did yesterday, meeting 1. Hi, BB. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself? So everybody talk for 2 seconds while I grab a couple of diagrams.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late for the meeting, Cash. I know quite a few people on this call, but my name is BB. I work for DFT. I'm the product owner and policy advisor for NAPTAN. Thank you.
Thank you, BB, for providing 2 minutes while I quickly did this. I'm just trying to grab, and I will talk this through, and because I also want to take off some of the answers that we came up with. So, right, here was a couple. I know that you all saw them, but I'm just trying to come up with a couple of different options. So we have 2 roads at a die. Can you see this? Am I sharing the right thing still?
Yes, you're seeing it. I just had a quick check, and I had some blank indicators.
Yes.
Those are actually the rail stations.
Oh, of course they are. I've got a whole pile of things on rail stations. We are going to be doing some cleaning up of rail stations, and there will be a conversation probably in November on rail station entrances and metro entrances and how they're managed and handled, and getting people's thoughts and ideas on that, because it'd be a bit of a mess. How's that for subtle?
That's very subtle for you.
Right, so I'm going to show a couple of different things. I recognize that it's not the greatest of diagrams, but hey, we've got a capital T junction with Mansfield Road going across this way and Nottingham Road going this way, and there's 2 stops there. Nottingham Road is stupidly long, by the way. So this is a stupidly long road that's like several miles long. So what would we call these 2 stops in terms of before, after, adjacent, etc.? If the bus drives up, stops at the stop, and then goes along this way, and then on the return journey comes this way and then comes on to Nottingham. So what would we call those 2 stops in terms of, are they before, after, are they adjacent, are they next to? How would you label them in your local authorities? Di, you can probably, you'll be the one who can go, oh, I know exactly how to do this one.
No, it's not exactly. That's the thing. They're very difficult things to do. It depends what the other stops. If those are brand new stops going in, it depends what the other stops around are called. We would call them both the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd call 1A and 1B.
Okay.
Whether that same thing is the pub name on the corner, or it would be called Mansfield Road.
Yep. So why don't we call them Mansfield Road, because that's what they were actually. That's the example that we ended up with, was they were called Mansfield Road. And we were trying to figure out, because they're not on Mansfield Road, they're on Nottingham Road. So are they before or after A or B, adjacent, opposite, etc.?
Oh, I wouldn't use adjacent and opposite in this case. I would just use A and B.
Okay.
So the description of it on our roadside information would be Nottingham. Well, it'd be the stop number, which means nothing to the public, I realise. Nottingham Road, Mansfield Road, stand A or stand B.
Cool.
That's
cool.
what we
get that.
Those.
So Leon, do you have any idea how you do it, or is this one I have to ask to Gerard?
I mean, so I don't name the bus stops, and neither does Gerard. So I don't really know what we would call it. Quite possibly, I mean, most likely we would call it the same name similarly, and they would have different stop letters.
Yeah, I was going to
Often
say,
we sort of have two, like both road names and then a slash between them. Possibly we might take that approach there, or sort of use a nearby landmark to sort of use as the name of the stop.
I've got landmarks a little bit further down. I'm just using the same or taking us through the same examples just to more for the rest of the team to get on record the different ways of doing the same thing, because there are so many different ways, and this is where I'm talking about the data dialects of there are so many different ways of doing the same. And Leon, London uses the same name with the indicators very clearly, A or B or different. And would it change if it was a lowercase T junction or a crossroads? I believe they're also called.
No, it wouldn't. But in that situation, you'd probably have more stops around the junction to cater for buses that run straight on.
And would you just? So would you use the same AB for the name, or? Yeah. Okay.
And if there were more stops, it would be C and D potentially as well. If there were stops north of the junction.
Cool. And then we've got this one we've got the stops, and instead of the bus turning, the bus continues on. Does that change anything in the name of the stops, or would they still be A and B?
Still the same.
Cool. You're lovely and consistent. You do try. So here's an interesting. Oh, sorry.
Can I add on? Can I just add on that? I think there's something again for me just thinking about who we're providing the information for. If this is a public facing information, I think there's a choice there. Is it for us? Is it for sort of operators and us as sort of technical experts to differentiate between stops, or are we using it to differentiate stops for the public? Which I think is sort of a root of the kind of question here. The kind of the name of the stop or how we're describing the stop to the public doesn't matter what the bus is doing. What matters is where is it providing access to for the member of the public. So if that is the stop for Mansfield Road, that should be what gets described to the customer. So I kind of agree with this approach. I would say it's the same for any location. It's Mansfield Road, and then you might differentiate with a stop A, stop B accordingly. But if you start introducing different things depending on the type of junction, that's a lot of cognitive load for any of your users.
Oh, I totally agree. And this is part of just kind of unpicking, because I was trying to understand the difference between near, before, after, because those are terms that different local authorities also use rather than A and B. Some people use near, some people use before, and some people use after. And it's a bit like, okay, what does before and after mean? What does this mean in this context? How do we put this together? So this is why I'm asking the questions on these specific drawings, because they're ones that we went through last time and I got very, very different answers. And that I think is the real interesting piece. But I think you're bringing up exactly the right thing. This is which bus stop in this situation is describing it so that Beryl, who doesn't know the local area, knows which bus stop to hop on at or to hop off at, or usually catch a bus at, to go where she wants to go. And I say that as someone who moved to London 20 years ago and spent a lot of time trying to figure out which direction I needed to catch buses in, and having to learn a lot of your compass directions within London so that I knew which way I was heading, so I could use the spider maps and figure out which side of the road I needed to be on to catch a bus. And especially when you get the one-way loops and things like that in London, it is so complicated. So indicators rule for those complex situations. Trying to understand how people have done them here with that same indicator field, because the indicator field as well, if the indicator field was A, B, C, D, E, life would have been so easy. Life would be so easy. And if there was no indicator, or if it's not if it's very obviously eastbound or westbound, and there's no like bubble on the top or something, then yeah, it becomes, let's just use the bearing. It becomes very, very simple. But we've not had that sort of thinking. Everyone's come up with different ways. So this is why I'm going to ask you, Di and Doug, if I have a monument here and it's called Monument Stop, how do I describe which stop is which?
A and B.
Di's just like, I'm
We
going to
do.
answer A and B the
No.
whole way through.
We do.
No, I love it. I love it. I think it's brilliant.
I've got to say, I really think that is how I would do it as well. I would just, I mean, maybe I would, because if you've got A and B, if you've got more stops, if you've got another stop 200 meters up the road, I might then use C and D for those stops personally. So I just think that would help. But generally, I think having, stop and then a specific, it's a bit like being at the railway station. You say you go to platform 1 if you want the train to Exeter. It's a really foolproof way of describing the location to the customer, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But only if you've got A and B written on the flag or on the bus stop somewhere.
Yeah, that is true.
There are places that I see when I'm out and about around the country that it's literally just a flag. And there's no information, there's no stop name, there's no indicator, stand name or anything like that. It's literally just a flag. And how you know what you're doing there, I do not know.
And that's where we get opposite and adjacent and opposite and outside and opposite, which is what these two are generally called by a lot of people. So this one will be adjacent and this one will be opposite. And because this is a building rather than a non-building thingy, adjacent becomes outside, and that again is cognitive load, and it's looking at these and raising this as like, okay, well, what do we do? How do we, if we move to something like this, how do we make this whole thing a lot more intuitive so that people can understand, and then how do we then get people to edit thousands of stops to make these make more sense and update their stops to make these make more sense?
I have a real problem with adjacent, because both of those stops are adjacent to the house. Both of those stops are opposite the house. Both of those stops are near the house. That is language that people who've worked with NAPTAN have talked to each other about, or just by nature of working with it have come up with. But that's not a description of that location. That's not a foolproof description of that location, is it?
I'm inclined to agree. Di, you've been working on this since forever. Do you recall any of the original discussions of whether it's what the difference between adjacent and outside is?
Oh, we were just handed reams of paper with the instructions on. It wasn't a case of there wasn't discussions.
Right. Yeah.
Given.
I did sense that because I've read a lot of the early emails. I did get access to the early email archive and did some diving in it at one point to try to find if there was an answer to a particular problem. I gave up because there was conflicting information. Every single email that I found had conflicting variations on it, or I couldn't make sense of this of the decision. This has been brilliant because this is giving me that idea of like, okay, so indicator needs to become something that is meaningful to Beryl when she's looking at those two stops. Now, I do know that there is a situation, and I'm just going to grab this. I'm just going to create a situation, and it's when we've got a non-marked stop. So there's I'll just put it there and try to, can I color it? I'll do it very, very pale grey. So there's an unmarked, an invisible stop. So there's one actual stop and the other one is opposite and unmarked. So there's one marked and one unmarked stop, which sometimes happens in little villages and things like that. There'll be the post office. We know that a post office is a big one. So there'll be post office, which is a marked stop with a flag nothing more than a flag, and then the other stop is just unmarked, but it's on the other side of the road. How would you tell people about what indicator or whatever would you put on the unmarked stop on the other side of the road?
For Naptown,
Yeah.
it would be obviously a custom stop, and in this instance we would use northbound if that is north.
Cool. So this
However,
is post office.
If we have, and we don't have information up at every stop, nothing like, but if we had information up at that stop, and I would hope we would if it's the main stop in the village, I would put, it would say services from this stop, and then the timetable, and then from the other side of the road, this timetable.
Right. So that would be north if it was going north as the indicator. I realise I've done that too light to see, so I'm going to put it in as green just so that I can see it. So this one, so yeah, there's a marked one, a custom one. You'd mark it as north because it's going north, and that's the direction that it's going in. Doug, would you do something similar? Would you think of something similar?
Yeah, I suppose that is probably the best answer, isn't it? Yeah. To describe the way it's going.
Just going to put in here bearing. Yeah, Leon, we don't do custom stops in London at all, as far as I'm aware. There's very, very few custom stops. So, or none that I can think of. Actually, I can go check. Just bear with me here 2 seconds. Let's find out if I'm right. I want bus stop type. Oh, I lied. There are custom stops. There are very, very few of them, and they're all in Heathrow. Oh, that explains. And I know exactly why they're all there, because they're the ones we're clearing up around Heathrow at the moment. They're all the ones that you use for the tiny little buses that run around Heathrow to go to various hotels. I love the fact that I should know them because they're all the ones that have done. So we don't actually have any custom stops as kind of part of what we're doing. Di, how are you for custom stops?
We've got a few, because a lot of my area is rural. Or
yes,
it's like, well, it's not even exclusively rural. If it's a very built-up area and you've got terrace housing, which the front door opens onto the pavement, there isn't room or desire for a physical bus stop.
You've only got 57.
Yeah, I've got 5 authorities though.
Oh, okay. So in this one, you've only got 57. Sorry,
Yes.
I think of these as unique authority. I'm only working in one. That makes. I can see that makes sense. And you're using. Yeah, the indicators are a little bit wild, but I can see that would. I can also understand why with terraced houses. This is also part of that tension that I keep trying to describe of a bus stop. It's good to have a bus stop close, but right outside your house is too close.
Yeah.
And that's the planning tension that I believe we're all all the local authorities have to deal with locating a bus stop. So when you do a custom one, do you have a little plaque on the wall, on the lamppost? There's just now.
Because then it would be marked.
So the moment you put a tiny little square of timetable or a QR code, does it become a marked stop?
Yeah.
So yours is completely binary from unmarked. The moment, so it's
if it's got
you get a little bit of marking,
floor or or lay-by, even if it's got nothing else, then it's marked.
Doug, do you do the same?
I don't know, because I don't know how it's been done previously. So I don't know is the answer.
That's completely fine. It was actually one of the questions that came up in my mailbox a couple of months back was how marked is marked, and I took it, and Di's answer was pretty much what most people said was the moment there is something to indicate that you can catch a bus from this particular spot, whether it's the tiniest of timetable cases or anything, it becomes marked. So because the local authority in question was saying, when do I mark it marked? And I was like, I think it's as soon as you mark it, it becomes marked. And it's just, yeah, it's one of those, it's not a spectrum. You go from one state to the other instantly. We've got about 20 minutes, and I can't think of anything else that I need to run yous all through. Is there anything you'd like to kind of question or talk about or amble on?
I guess I just think about that bearing point and thinking about when we looked at London and most of the east were pointing east, but there actually is an interesting case study whereby the bearing is east because that is the direction the bus is travelling in, but it immediately goes round and roundabouts, and actually in terms of your journey you're going to head west, so there might actually be a case where you had a bearing east but the service was a westbound service. So I guess where I'm going with that is that probably isn't necessarily duplication in indicator, is it? Even though I initially said it was. I'm just correcting my own mistake.
So might leave east and go around about and head west as westbound service. But so the indicator would be westbound because it's a westbound service.
Bearing east, mightn't you?
Yeah. And the bearing is east. For the bus leaving the stop. Yeah, because weirdly enough, we used to take bearing as 360 variations on 360 degrees and then convert it into east, north, south, the 16 ordinal points. And we didn't. We took the 16 ordinal points and converted them into degrees in some places. And now we've stopped that and we just take whatever people give us. Everyone gives us the cardinal points. Nobody gives us the degrees bearing or anything like that. So as far as I'm aware, Pete, that is what works for buses when they're leaving a stop, so that their AVL actually registers correctly. Because I know from visiting new ventures down in Kent that two bus stops side by side, sometimes it was registering as leaving the wrong bus stop because it wasn't taking on bearing. So it was registering as arriving in the wrong direction or leaving early. And it was doing crazy things when they had two bus stops on opposite sides of a very small road because their traps overlapped the areas that I'm having a larger conversation with them to try to understand some of this problem, because it's also a lot to do with why people ask for bus stops, the bus stop in Naptan to be moved, even if it's only a small couple of meters. It's because of those overlapping traps, or for the AVL to say you've arrived at the stop and now you're leaving, and they'll sometimes register on the wrong one. And it's all about the bearings. Anything else?
In that situation, though, this bearing situation, I would here we would say it's the direction the bus is looking when it's sat at the bus stop. So I would call that eastbound. It would, if it was on that time, that stop would be an eastbound stop.
Would that be the bearing or the indicator?
The bearing.
The bearing, but
And,
you,
and
but
the,
you
well,
could.
if it's a invisible stop, because my indicator would be A or B. If it's a
Oh yeah.
if it's a mark stop, if it's a custom stop, then the direction would be eastbound as well.
Okay. Eastbound if not A or B.
Yeah.
I can't type today. There we are. We'll do it that way. Eastbound if not A or B. Fantastic. Leon, you've got your hand up. You're going to come up with another good example here.
Well, on this, I mean, to be honest, I'm going to ask about a completely different thing. But on this, I mean, we do have sort of bearings in terms of 360-degree angles for bus stops. We have I mean, it's in our asset management system, and but then we kind of have to provide NatTan with sort of north, northeast, east, that kind of bearing. But yeah, I think it is interesting that we do have a sort of more granular kind of bearing, but I don't think sort of NatTan sort of supports that.
We should be able to. I'm going to say, I believe in the past we did, but we also did some overwriting, and this is back in the days in the previous NatTan that we've moved away from. So let's just have a look. Send me a couple of examples where you've got a degree, because there's also a conversion. I know that there's some that flip between 2 points, or that all were flipping between 2 points because of which way round it was converted, because they were basically in the middle of the two ordinal points with the bearing that was given. And sometimes it was round to northwest, and otherwise it would round to west type thing. And it's all just those, yeah. And we're not using 16, we're using 8, because we're using the 4 cardinals and the 4 intermediates. We're not going north, west, etc. Which, and this would become interesting as to whether that's important for the accuracy of your buses leaving, and your AVL. Whether we start pushing towards that and fix that up.
Yeah, I don't think that's really an issue for us, because essentially we have the route planned out, and so you'd have a specific stops that the bus would stop at. So
you do yours slightly differently, because your AVL and your timers are slightly different. We'll just put this part of the conversation under and London, because London you do things slightly differently, and I also know that you do your stop announcements generally slightly differently, because you can't get reliable GPS reads because of canyoning, not because of lack of signal, which is Di's problem and everyone else's problem. You have too much canyoning, so you do seconds from stops and things like that. Leon's like, our system really well. I was like, I learnt it. I've had to learn it. Pete.
It's not related necessarily to the bearing side, but the general conversation from earlier on about reporting things to local authorities. And I'm wondering if there's any plans to bring anything into place to kind of encourage authorities to make changes quicker. I've had so many authorities kick the can down the road, and even some saying they won't change stops until 2025. And I think with the coming up with the rules with PSV AIR, which is the next stop announcement rules, NatTan's becoming more and more important. And I do believe it's in the bus open data regulations that local authorities are meant to be maintaining NatTan properly now. And I'm seeing that more and more are kicking a can down the road or trying not partake in anything regarding NatTan.
So, Pete, you've brought up a really good point. I'm going to look to BB to come in with the policy side. I'm going to say this is one of the reasons why I wanted to ensure that whatever we do in terms of contact, that there is some visibility for DFT, see what's going on, because we're hearing two very different tales about some of these requests from people, and if we can just see what's going on and when they're being put in and what's being requested, that's going to help us help the ecosystem, or help me help the ecosystem, because I get dragged into these conversations about why is this local authority not updating, and I can often turn around and go, because this person retired and they haven't got anyone in to replace them currently and can answer some of the questions. But I think it's really important. BB, can I throw to you for an update? I said earlier on in the meeting, I said that I know there's some policy reviews going on and we are waiting on the outcomes of those to be able to say anything about things like school buses and some of the other outstanding issues that are around. Do you have any thoughts?
Excuse me, Jay. I would have to liaise with the appropriate teams within DFT. So perhaps after this meeting, Jay, we can get together and think about that, and I can arrange some conversations.
Yeah, I think it would be really good, and maybe and because I know that the stuff isn't out yet and it's not gone through Parliament yet. The bills are still rumbling around, the policies are still rumbling around. So I think it's making sure that we can put a slot maybe into one of the future upcoming meetings and just let people know that we'll be talking about this and open to hearing things.
Yes, absolutely.
Might be where we land,
Mm-hmm.
if that sounds good.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I can do the politician thing of just skating over a problem and kicking the can down the road to pick it up in a little bit of time. Leon, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, one thing I was just going to wonder about is previously there was the NapTan viewer, and I think at one point there was talk of NapTan mapper. It's been a while since heard about this.
So the ability to map NapTan stops. There is a GitHub tool, or a Python tool that's up on GitHub. One of the things that this was done by another team working on NapTan and published and then given to me. One of the things we've quickly recognized is nobody knows how to use Python within the ecosystem, or very few people know how to use Python within the ecosystem. So even though the tool provided some mapping of NapTan, it just wasn't fit for purpose. It is one of the things that's rumbling on my backlog. What I would be interesting to understand is, what would a NapTan viewer give you, or people who you're thinking about, that the tools that you're using internally don't? And this is part of trying to understand where there was a need for tools to do something that was being done by DFT. The other thing was the version that you're talking about, the very old tool, was created in some time. It was very broken. It didn't work. It also had a whole pile of rules and exceptions. So these were all the business rules. And the problem was that they would constantly reapply. So, for example, the stops on Waterloo Bridge, the Somerset House stop on Waterloo Bridge would constantly be flagged for being too close to water because the systems didn't understand height. So it's on a bridge over water, so therefore, but it was too close to water. So it would be constantly flagged up as being too close to water to be a valid stop. And Gerard or somebody would have to go in and turn off the warning every single time. So I was like, this is why I throw away a lot of the business rules. So we're still trying to really understand, and I'm happy to get people's thoughts as to how good the mapping was and why it was needed, and who needed it, so that we can look at how we provide that in a way that's really useful. Because NapTan on a map, there's so many different ways it could be used. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's useful to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and you've worked with me long enough to know MVP, trying to think of what works in 2050 and doing the minimum, not doing the minimum, but really thinking about what something's there for and what the value is. Doug.
I know we're right on time. This is a whole different topic, but I just with Pete's last comment there. I mean, our situation as a local authority is we have no mechanism to update NAPTAN following somebody retiring in another authority who was doing it for us for free at the bottom of their heart in the evenings. And to update NAPTAN would cost us a 5-figure sum. We have no budget and can't afford to do it, even though we've got a responsibility to do it. So when just listening to other authorities saying we won't be able to do it for until 2025 or beyond, we actually at the moment have no ability or plan to be able to update NAPTAN.
So Doug, even the help that I provided you, it's not been.
Well, very kindly, those people have done it for us once, but they, ultimately this is a business for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, we won't be able to do it again.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. And thank you for raising that, because that is one of the things that I think me and BB need to take through to the people who are going to be asking a lot of local authorities in terms of, hey, we need to have the PSVA IR. This is why the naming stops thing is so important, how we create names, because they're going to be read out. And if you can create them but you can't change them, you've got no money. That snowballs in. So yeah, I saw BB's thumbs up, so we will take that and make those comments and perhaps use you as an example, because one of the things I know with this ecosystem is it's all retiring. And there's new blood coming through, which is great to see, but also when people retire, there's so much going. No matter how planned that retirement is, there'll be things that just people didn't know that they were doing, or they were doing unofficially, or they were doing on as a side piece that nobody knew about, or was kind of vaguely agreed 20 years ago, and nobody's gone back and redone the vague agreement because the two people were still there, and suddenly they both retire and everyone's like, yeah. Sorry, Di, that is not what's going to happen when you retire, because yours is going to be beautifully written out. You're going to have a wonderful handover to a lovely new person who will take over your work and be just as enthused as you are.
Okay.
You had a question though, Di, or a comment?
A comment. I mean, fundamentally it's updating NAPTAN, but it's also the link between NAPTAN and what's on the roadside. So we have an issue in the Tees Valley where at the moment there is no mechanism for updating the names on the plates, on the flags at the roadside. So if I update NAPTAN and Google Maps tells Brenda that this stop is called Hardwick Court, and she gets to Hardwick Court and on the flag it says the Brown Cow, that's not helping her as a newcomer to the area. Whereas if I leave it in NAPTAN as the Brown Cow, she gets to the Brown Cow. Yes, it might say it on the flag, but there's no Brown Cow anywhere around because there's a nursing home been built in its spot. And it's that disjoint, because we have no mechanism for updating that. What's my priority? Do I make it match what's actually physically there, the nursing home, or do I leave it matching what the flag is saying that stop's called?
This will be this is next month. I need to think about this for next month. This is all what we're going to talk about, because this is the naming conventions problem, because everyone is struggling with the same thing. But I think you bring up a really good one. I'm just going to note it down, which is physical street versus NAPTAN versus NAPTAN. Because I know that I used to talk about it as street versus schema, but it's not. It's street versus NAPTAN. NAPTAN is the digital analog of what is in the street. And I know that sounds a very weird mix of words, but it is not a digital double, because that would imply you get a real time. There is data available from what's in the street, and that's usually from eyeballs walking around, or people walking around going, this stop is called the wrong thing and we need to rename it. And I will use Dunton Road again. Dunton Road is listed as Dunton Road on the physical stop, and yet it is listed as Old Kent Road Tesco's in at least 3 of the buses that stop at that stop, because there's actually a Dunton Road around the corner that is also called Dunton Road. And it's kind of one of those ones of Old Kent Road Tesco's. It's that brown cow problem. It's the brown. It's Old Kent Road Tesco's. The Old Kent Road Tesco's is still there. It's a really obvious. It's one of the biggest landmarks on Old Kent Road. So everyone knows where it is. It's still just one of those ones of how do you then name your stops? Do you need to go along and physically change the names of your stops? Leon possibly has a little bit more money of going and being able to change the plate names or the names on or the names on flags than Di. The fact that you have, are you able to get your broken stops fixed? And when somebody vandalizes your stops, do you have the ability to at least get those repaired, or are you in that? Nope. Yeah. That's also part of it as well and this is, again, I think part of what we need to collect and collate and get this feedback and get this real world experience so we can explain it to people and go, you're wanting this, and here's the problem. We can have the most beautifulest data, but if it doesn't match the street, then Brenda and Beryl and Beverly and everybody's going to get completely confused, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger when we put in these accessibility, the next bus voiceovers, the all of those things. They need the data and the real world to totally mesh and match and be and be consistent and coherent, and that's money.
Yeah.
It's bank. It's serious bank to get some of that stuff done. And when you can't even update, I'm pointing to Doug, when you can't even update your NAPTAN, that is, there are some real problems. So Pete, maybe actually, hopefully this has been really useful to see that when people are kicking the can down the road, it's because they're waiting for that next budget release to get their BSIP and their BSOG, bus services improvement and bus services operating grants that will allow them to take some of that and get the funding to do some of the stuff that they have to do, because for whatever reasons this was never in their budget for 2024. Does that help you at all, Pete? Or is this, you're just sitting there going, this is worse than I thought?
There's certainly some comments there that have helped me realise some of the situations in local authorities. I certainly think it'd be helpful sometimes if, when I make that contact with local authorities, that was said, rather than having to come to meetings such as this, but that's another matter. I think it's a difficult one because the database, especially with the upcoming regulations for announcements, it is going to be a bigger and bigger thing. And the more accurate it is, then the better it is for everybody. The naming situation, I get, is going to be a more difficult one. But as far as coordinates are concerned, that's where my focus has mainly been, noticing where stops are misplaced. And that should, in theory, be easy to fix.
So there's a whole thing about coordinates, Pete. Why don't you? Thanks, Doug. Pete, I'm going to suggest I'll stop recording first, and then I'll make the suggestion. And I'm just stopping the recording because I was going to.